Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about my tarot practice in October. So we're going to go through a few little memorable moments from October, as well as take a look at the decks that I worked with. And there are a lot of them because I feel like I pulled out all my spooky season decks for this year. And then I want to touch upon a couple of books that I read throughout the month. So to get started, let's do memories. I'm just gonna pull out my little handy planner here just so I can remember what it is that I wanted to talk about real quick. The biggest thing for October was that I got to go to the Northwest Tarot Symposium. I'm sorry I didn't really do a big wrap-up thing. I did do a small sort of wrap-up and haul with my members, but I was just like really exhausted after that big adventure. It was fantastic. I enjoyed every moment of it, but it was a lot. And for somebody who struggles with chronic health issues, it's definitely a lot. But I just really wanted to also mention it here because it was a huge thing in October. The biggest thing I think for me that like the biggest takeaway was the fact that I got to hang out with Lisa and Peggy like all weekend long. I know Lisa did a whole little Newts wrap up. I'm gonna link that below because like we were pretty much inseparable through most of the week or the weekend. And so pretty much everything Lisa did, I did, with a few exceptions. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed just getting to hang out with them, spend the whole weekend with them. It was fantastic. My husband came and, visited with us here and there because the conference was only 20 minutes away from my house. So he was in and out, hanging out with us as well. Other really big thing was that we got to do our Tarot Tube meetup, and that was the Thursday before the conference actually started. And we had a private get-together, private meetup with people from our channels, both it was with Lisa and Peggy and myself, people from our channels, people from the tarot community in general, and it was so much fun to get to hang out with everybody. We did this trade. It was great. The place was totally sketch, but lesson learned. Now we know, right? It was all good. It was all good. We had a great time and it was fantastic. A couple of little memorable things I'm just gonna show. We gave out journals to all of the people who attended our meetup. They had a really wonderful, do I have one here? Yes, I do. Pen holder on them as well that Peggy had made, which was fantastic. I've got a couple of these running around that I use on my journals as well because you can just slip a pen and a highlighter in there. It was really handy during the conference as well. But on top of that, I had clipped in the sticker that I made. So that was our logo for our meetup, which was so cool. So this is a vinyl sticker. I have a couple of them stuck on journals and I have one of them stuck in here. And then the other thing that I made for Lisa and I is this little card with, it's just this little alien hugging a unicorn that I drew for the both of us to kind of represent our two decks. And then we have the titles of the decks on the backside. So mine is Tarot of the Fifth Kind and hers is the Unicorn Journeys Tarot. We're both in the process of working on ours. I think we're both going indie with them, although I don't want to speak for Lisa, but I'll be having more information about my deck at some point because like it's an alien deck, but it's not really about the aliens. So I definitely want to do like a video probably when I actually get the artwork done because I am drawing that deck myself. And it's been a whole experience. So I've shared a little bit with it here and there. I think I shared a little bit about it in my last month's reflections, showed a couple of cards. So those have been the really big things in October, making a lot of progress on my deck, which is just kind of, I don't know, coming out of nowhere. I really didn't think I would ever like digitally draw a deck myself because I'm doing it in Procreate. Drawing digitally is definitely not my medium. This is a totally new experience for me. So it's been really exciting and really fun to do. But really the big highlight from October was Newts, hanging out with Lisa and Peggy and getting to meet everybody at the meetup. It was fantastic and I really enjoyed hanging out with everybody. Okay, so that's kind of like the memory thing. I'm not gonna dwell too long on that because I have a lot of decks. So we're gonna start with the decks that I worked with in the monthly medicine, which is a guided tarot practice that I do in the membership here on my channel. And for the month of October, we were doing light into the shadow. So we were kind of essentially doing shadow work, which was really a butt kick for most of us. But it also gave us opportunity because each week had a theme. It gave us an opportunity, if we so choose, to tie in our decks with that weekly theme, which of course, for the most part, I did. So our first week was the Haunted Week, and I ended up using the Tarot of Haunted House and my Fallen Angel Oracle. So I think both of these decks are fairly new to my collection. The Tarot of Haunted House definitely is. Here's the backs. I have edged mine in black. I think I have modified or edged most of the decks that I worked with this month. This deck is fantastic. It's been one that's like been on my wish list forever, but it's a very readily available, very affordable mass market deck. And so it always got like bumped off the list just because I was always like, oh, it'll be there, right? It'll be there, which is totally true. But we were doing the Haunted Week, and I really, really wanted to use this deck during the Haunted Week. So I went ahead and picked it up. I think I picked it up at the end of September, kind of in preparation for October. This deck is really, really smart. And I really enjoyed the illustrations. I really enjoyed working with it. And the little guidebook that comes with it, the little white book, which I think is by Sasha Graham, is fantastic. And I got into that quite a bit. So it's been a really, really fun one. It's also a deck that I think I would use outside of the spooky season, because it really does, even though it's kind of this, haunted house with a kind of monster theme thing going on and all that, I do feel like it's a deck that I could work with year round, because darkness is a part of every day, right? The other deck I worked with is the Fallen Angel Oracle. This deck was a butt kicker. It was so mean. And I went through, actually, as I was working with the deck, I was like, at one point I went through and I was like, are there any nice keywords in this deck? But here we have love, change, travel, empathy, recuperation. It's actually a really, really balanced Oracle deck. And I really appreciate that about it, but I swear I pulled all the negative or the more challenging keyword cards throughout the month of October. It didn't, I don't think, ever gave me anything nice or reassuring or anything like that, which was totally fine, because we were I know I definitely got this card. We were doing shadow work. We were drawing out that darkness, looking at where we have some challenges, looking at, where we kind of keep things hidden. So these two decks ended up working really, really well for me for the Haunted Week. And really the key thing for that week was, what's still hanging around for us? What's sort of our unfinished business? And these two decks worked really well for that. I would often pull Oracle as the focus, and then Tarot for that extended message to kind of see where I can dive deeper into what the focal point message was telling me. Again, there are guided prompts. So we have spreads, we have prompts, we have things that we're in particular looking at and working with. And so I always use those as kind of the structure, the foundation for the reading that I'm doing. But oftentimes I'll add cards to it as well, because I know a couple of times I added the Urban Crow, which is a deck we're going to look at here in a little bit. But as far as being a pairing, these two decks worked really well together for me. Again, the Fallen Angels was mean all the time, but I really did like it for that, because it brought out what was hidden, right? It was telling me what I needed to know, not what I wanted to hear, which those are often two very different things. So those were the two decks that I ended up using for the Haunted Week: the Haunted House, or Tarot of a Haunted House, I think it's called, and the Fallen Angels. Again, the little white book for this deck is really, really good. I'll just show you real quick the guidebook for the Fallen Angel Oracle, because it's quite good. It's very short, very succinct, but I did actually get into the guidebook because, for one, I don't know who most of these fallen angels or energies are. So I got into the guidebook every time I pulled a card, but it's really short and succinct, so it didn't feel like it was hindering my reading at all. In fact, it was adding another additional layer and bringing some clarity, which is really fantastic. So I enjoyed working with the little guidebook. It does come in this weird box that keeps them together, but of course I have made bags for mine because I really like making bags for my decks, particularly if they come in boxes that don't really work for me. This is a new bag that I made, and I think I showed this bag before, but I mean, it's not really about the bags, right? So anyway, those were the 2 decks that I used for the Haunted Week, the Tarot of a Haunted House, and the Fallen Angel Oracle. So the next week in the monthly medicine was the Drained Week, and that was where we were looking at kind of, what is draining our energy from us. And so we had a sort of vampire theme for those who chose to use it, which was fantastic. I ended up using the Tarot of Vampires, which is wonderful. I have edged mine in this beautiful, beautiful red. It's 2 coats of red though to get it that deep and rich with the Tombow. Now I started that week off with the Lantern Oracle, which I'm actually not going to pull out here because I did 1 draw with it and it did not work for me. Like for whatever reason, I was just not feeling the Lantern Oracle with the Vampire Tarot. I've seen a lot of people use those 2 decks together, but for me, it was a total miss. So I ended up pulling up this one, which the artwork isn't necessarily the same, like at all, and I'll show you here paired up together here in a moment, but like this is one of my favorite decks for this time of year. I really love the keywords on this deck. I really love the messages in the guidebook. It's like, this is one of those oracle decks that I always get into the guidebook because there are messages from these little vampire people. I look at them as dolls. They're vampire dolls to me. And this, it's very distinct Jasmine Beckett Griffith artwork, but I really, really like it in this deck. And in fact, I have a couple of decks with her art in it now. It was an art style that I was like, ooh, no, I don't want that. They look like dolls to me, but I do really like them. So I've edged mine a long time ago in like brown. And then we have the Tarot of Vampires, which is, the Ian Daniels deck, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed my readings with this deck. It's such a great balance of sort of like light and shadow. I think we tend to see this deck more as being like a shadow deck, but to me, it's very balanced. Like it invites you into the shadow, it invites you into hunger, it invites you into desire, but there's also this underlying sort of a spiritual kind of light side of things as well, that kind of gives me this idea of like finding the light in the dark. And I really, really like that about this deck. I love decks that are multi-layered. I didn't get this one for a really, really long time, even though I was like, here the guidebook is phenomenal, and it's absolutely wonderful. I really wanted to read the guidebook, and that was the main reason why I got the deck, because I was like, these images don't really work for me. It's just, I don't know. I didn't like it whenever I saw it online, but in person, it's very like Anne Rice, Interview with a Vampire, which is totally my thing. I love that. I feel like that's a sort of imagery that I grew up with, being a teenager in the 90s, and that was like one of my favorite books, one of my favorite movies, right? And so up close, I think that this is one of those decks that looks even better in person because you can see all the details up close, which we don't often get to really dive into when we're just watching, walk-throughs or flip-throughs or things like this where people are talking about the deck. But the messages, that was really what I was after, right? The energy is so compatible with these 2 decks. I really, really love it. And I really enjoyed them together. It does look beautiful with the Lantern Oracle, like for anybody who has that. And I know some other people have used it and shown it as well. But for me, they didn't click in terms of how they read together. So I ended up switching out for this, and was so much happier with it. Like this had more of that energy that I was looking for. And it was so funny because the Drained week was the week after the Northwest Tarot Symposium, and I was just completely drained in every way, shape, and sense of the word, right? I was completely drained physically, mentally, emotionally, right? All that stuff. And so this was really interesting. I spent a lot of time working with these images, working with these decks. This is one of my favorite cards. I think I mention that every time. And it was really wonderful to kind of sit with that. The only sort of drawback that I had to the Drained week happened to falling on the week after Newts, which when I created the medicine for the monthly medicine for October, like I wasn't thinking about that. I probably should have, but it was a blessing and a curse in a sense, because I was able to kind of sink into that drained energy because that's literally what I was feeling. However, I feel like the fact that I was drained from newts might have been masking any other place where I might have been feeling some of that drainage or that burnout that was really supposed to be the focus of that week. So I did end up going back a couple of times throughout the month to kind of use this pairing and looking at, okay, now that I've kind of, in a sense, recovered from newts, right? Recovered from that whole experience. Just again, not that it was bad, right? It was really, really good, but I'm not a super healthy person. So something like that it does take a lot out of me, and it takes me a while to kind of get back into the swing of things. And so I use these two decks to kind of help me throughout the month look at, okay, now that I'm outside of that, where else am I feeling that drainage, right? Where else am I feeling like I'm overwhelmed? Love that Sun card. So I did also end up working with these two decks like individually as well. Like I said, this little Vampire Oracle is just it's so special. It's just one of my favorites. I couldn't imagine not having it now at this point. So I often pull cards from it during the spooky seasons, just because I love connecting with the imagery. I love connecting with the messages in the guidebook. It's really, really fantastic. And then of the Tarot of Vampires, I ended up using quite a bit for just other things throughout the month, but it definitely was my main focus deck for the drained week in the monthly medicine. I do just want to mention real quick the Phantasmagoria, the guidebook for the Tarot of Vampires. Like, even if the artwork doesn't resonate with you, like, this is a deck I would totally recommend, if for nothing else other than the guidebook. Like, I know this guidebook shows up a lot in like the top 10 guidebook things, and I think it would definitely be there for me too. There's so much in here about kind of the idea of shadow, of monsters, talking about the tree of life and all of that beyond just your typical tarot association. So I feel like this is a really, really substantial guidebook, and like, even if the artwork doesn't resonate with you, I highly recommend getting it just to have the guidebook, if for nothing else. There are a few decks that I have because the guidebooks are amazing, even though the deck may not necessarily be a total hit for me. I mean, that's not the case with the Tarot Vampires, because I really, really enjoy that deck, and I will definitely keep it, and it's definitely going to be an important part of my collection. But man, this is one of these guidebooks that I would just recommend on its own. It was absolutely fantastic. So those were the two main decks that I used throughout the drained week. So in the next week in monthly medicine, we did like essentially zombies. I think a lot of us use zombie decks. In particular, a lot of us use this zombie deck. But that was our unearthed week. So we were looking at, you know, like what keeps coming back around for us. And for a lot of us, we were looking at also like stalker cards. What stalker card keeps coming up, and why does it keep coming up for you? So that was a lot of fun. I ended up using my zombie tarot, which is kind of a staple this time of year. Absolutely love this deck. And then I also used my zombie oracle. This one is by Orshi. Again, I'll have links for all these in the description box below for you. I made my bags match. I mean, I just kind of had to because I feel like they go together. I did edge mine in this brown color, and I let it be a little bit kind of like grungy because it works with the aesthetic of this deck. This is, I think she has a couple of others now. This is the smaller, maybe she calls it the mini, but it's the smaller kind of pocket size. I think it's playing card size edition of the Zombie Oracle. She also has a larger, more traditional Oracle size one as well. Like, this deck is super smart. I absolutely love what she did with it. I love the keywords. It's just, yeah, it's a fantastic little reader. I know there's a second edition, or not. Is that an edition? There's another deck. It's got totally different keywords, totally different artwork, and I definitely want to pick that one up at some point as well. But for right now, I was just focusing on using this one because, like, it's just, yeah, it's so good. Or she did such a good job with this deck. It's just a great, really to the point, but very usable deck. And I feel like even though it's like zombie apocalypse, right? I do feel like this is a deck that I could use year round, actually. I don't feel like it needs to be exclusively a spooky season or dark time of the year deck. I feel like this would be a deck that I could use like anytime I was in that sort of trying to unearth something energy. Same with like the zombie tarot as well. I love this card. I think it's amazing. So anyway, I'll flip through the whole deck because I want to show you how they look together. Yeah, that was a great pairing, particularly with my zombie tarot, which I know I've shown like a lot, a lot these last few months, but like this deck really hasn't left my table in several months now. There's that Queen of Cups, love her, shows up every time. It's so good. It's so good. I've run out of things to say about it because I just say the same thing over and over again. It's super smart. It's super cheeky. It doesn't, like, it's definitely in the shadow energy, but it also, there's humor here. Like there's a dark humor, which I really, really appreciate. It's so much fun. But again, it's a deck that like I've been playing with outside of the spooky season because I feel like to just say it's just a spooky season October deck is kind of like limiting because I feel like it has so much more potential than that, and I've done other videos on that, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I just want to kind of show you how these work together. They are kind of like, it feels like the vintage meets modern in this sort of combination, which I really don't mind. I think it actually works quite well because kind of what we're getting is this idea of the past and the present coming together. And I think it's really cool, but really it's like those keywords on Orshi's deck on the Zombie Oracle are really fantastic. And I was using them a lot as kind of like focal points. So that would be like a focal point that I would build my reading around. Again, I was working with it alongside the monthly medicine, so I was following the prompts in that as well. But I also played with it a lot on its own, just kind of using these as either focal points or actually as spread positions, which worked really well too, because I would use it and I would say like the spread position is simplicity, and then I would pull a tarot to say, what do I need to know about simplicity? Right? And they worked really well in that sense as well. And I like that it's smaller because I could do like a lot of them. I could have quite a few of these cards on the table and then just pull a couple of tarot to really dive deep into that. And I think it worked fantastically. I really love the grungy nature of it too. That's totally like makes my 90s heart happy. Because according to my kids, I'm still stuck in the 90s, which is probably true. Oh, there's that Queen of Cups with fuel. Love it. So yeah, Orshi's little zombie oracle. Man, if you don't have this one, like I really, really recommend it. It's fantastic. And again, I've used it for other things beyond just, you know, working with the zombie tarot as well, although they do pair really well together. It's a deck that I feel like I can use for other things, which I always really appreciate about an oracle deck. And then of course we have my zombie tarot, which I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite decks. Probably need to just go ahead and put it in my favorites basket at this point because it's kind of like earned itself a place there. So that was the two decks that I used during the Unearth week, my Zombie Tarot and my Zombie Oracle. So the last week in our monthly medicine was the supported week, or the last full week, I should say. And it was kind of based on the idea of like bones, like what supports you within yourself, right? And I did end up using a little bit of the bone skeleton energy, but I realized that like I hadn't really gotten into my Madame Lydia's yet, and that I just had to fix that. So these are both indie decks. The Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's tarot it comes and goes in print. Memento Mori, I believe, is in print, but again, I'll leave links for you. I love this oracle deck. I think I showed it in a recent video as well this month, but it's just got a great energy. It's very succinct. There's also a full Lenormand in here, so if I want to pull that out and do include a Lenormand aspect to my readings, I can. Although I often just kind of keep them all mixed in together, and I use them as just general oracle cards, which I think works really, really well. So it's a really intuitive deck. I'm going to just split it because it's quite a chunky deck so that we can do our little side-by-side pairing here. The Madame Lydia's is like, this deck. It's one of my favorites. I think I mentioned it as well because I think I mentioned this is my replacement for the Bohemian Gothic because of that deck just didn't land for me, and that's okay. But this is the deck, man. This is the deck. I love this deck. It's so cool. It's so cool. It's so creepy. And yeah, it doesn't really have, I mean, it has some skulls and bones and stuff, but it's not, it wasn't really the skeleton vibe. It was more the supportive vibe that I was going for, because I do feel like this deck is strangely supportive, even though it's like got this totally creepy macabre thing going on. But these two decks together, this is just a match made in heaven. I mean, they're both kind of have that vintage gothic style, which I love. I also really like when I have kind of if I have a busier deck, like the Madame Lydia's is, like there's a lot going on in these cards. I like pairing it with a more simple oracle, something that's a little bit more minimalistic, because I feel like it really helps me to draw in and focus in on what the heart of the reading is, and then I can continue to add layers on top of that. So like crystal ball, that would be the heart, but the crystal ball is supported by these bones, which kind of mimics what's going on here in the Three of Swords, which is interesting. And we have like the ball with the skull that kind of mirrors the circular shape as we see in the Five of Coins. So things like that, it really helps me to kind of focus in on what the main message is, and then I can add, you know, all my layers and stuff on top of that. It works really well for the supported week as well, in terms of the prompts that I'd created for that, because again, I was able to really get focused in on the main message, and then add all those additional layers that we see in the complexity of the imagery in the Madame Lydia. And like, it's just super cool, right? It's just a super, super cool. This is totally my Halloween aesthetic. Like for spooky season, I mean, like I like the vampires and I like the haunted house and all that, right? But like this is totally my aesthetic for this time of year. It's dark and grungy and a little gothic, but it's not scary, because I don't do scary. I'm not a scary movie person, but I do like kind of the dark, creepy curiosity cabinet type of energy. And I feel like I get that with these two decks without it being like outside of my comfort zone, if that makes sense. We say that a lot in videos, don't we? Like, if that makes sense, because it makes sense to me in my little brain, and it doesn't always make sense to other people. Anyway, I also love all the botanicals. Like, both of these decks have a lot of botanicals in them. I love this Ace of Cups. And I like that I can tie that energy in as well. And again, color, movement, focal points, right? All that is really fantastic. I mean, I could go on and on and on talking about both of these decks, because they're like really two favorite decks in my collection. I think I mentioned in the other video, like I always keep the title card because like this deck has the most awesome name. It is Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's Tarot of Monsters, the Macabre, and Autumn Scenes. How epic is that? I love it. I just call it my Madame Lydia's deck, but that's pretty epic. So yeah, I really enjoy working with both of these decks. As I think I've mentioned before, like I tend to keep Madame Lydia's like as a special kind of almost sacred deck for this time of year. So I don't bring it out a ton the rest of the year. So it's very much a special interaction with this deck when it does come out. The Memento Mori I actually bring out quite often because it's very versatile. It works with a lot of different decks. So anyway, those were the two decks that I used for the supported week in the monthly medicine, which is the Madame Lydia's and the Memento Mori. So let's talk, I actually have three here. Let's talk about another pairing sort of group of cards that I ended up using together quite a bit this month. In particular for my Simple Sunday spreads. Those are on my Facebook group that I post those every Sunday. And I ended up using the Urban Crow and both of my copies of the Raven's Prophecy because yes, now I have two. Let's go ahead and open these. I'm going to show you the pairing with the untrimmed version of the Raven's Prophecy because I picked this deck up. I was gonna lay the backs down. I mean, I need to get my YouTube act together, right? I ended up picking up, this deck was on the trade table at the Northwest Tarot Symposium, and even though I had recently just trimmed my copy, this actually has the older cardstock, which I prefer. It's like, I don't know, it's a bit more cardboardy actually. It's really nice and thin and flexible, but it also doesn't have quite the sheen on it that the newer cardstock has. And I'm really enjoying having it in both ways, because I feel like this with the orange border, as I mentioned in the Mod With Me video that I did on this deck, if you happen to see that, I feel like the orange borders really lend itself well to the fall and the spooky time of year, which I do actually really like. And I went back and forth about whether or not I was even going to trim the deck. So now I have it in both versions. So I feel like this is the version that like I'm going to be using during the fall, and then the borderless one I feel like I can use all year round. We'll take a look at that in a moment, just in case you haven't seen it. The deck that I most often paired it with is the Urban Crow Oracle. I will be honest, the guidebook for this it didn't really connect for me. But I also didn't find that I really needed the guidebook. In fact, when I got into the guidebook, I was often more confused by what I was seeing on the card and what it meant for me in terms of my reading. So I kind of just stopped looking at the guidebook, and I just took the artwork and the keywords, and that's what I went off of. So for me, this is a really, really intuitive deck. I really enjoyed it, actually. It's one that I've kind of looked at and okay, I just have to stop for a minute, because like that's what my dog looks like. Little Tucker. He's not full Boston Terrier. He's half Boston Terrier, half French Bulldog. So he's colored like a Boston Terrier, but he's built like a French Bulldog, which means he's built like a tank. Anyway, you've probably seen him here or there on my videos. But I really enjoy this deck, and it's a deck that I feel like I can use again all year round. It doesn't feel tied into a particular season, and I really like the keywords. I found them to be really succinct. I was joking with my members when I did this, was talking about this deck originally when I first got it, that like the indie edition apparently has a card that says Dawn on it, and I was kind of like legit disappointed that the mass market didn't, but like I got over it. It's fine. I don't need a card with my name on it, but I was just kind of like, oh, I was kind of hoping it was gonna be in there. That's so silly, right? Let's flip through a couple as we're just kind of hanging out and chatting here. I feel like these decks definitely are really meant to go together. You know, crows, ravens, I guess, but it's really about how succinct the keywords are with the Raven's Prophecy. I feel like it really does work as a wonderful like focal point. And again, I tend to say that a lot, but that's really how I work with my Oracle decks, right? Oftentimes it's a focal point. What I also used this deck for quite a bit throughout the month was clarifiers for my other readings that I was doing. So for the monthly medicine readings, I know I used it during the Haunted Week for sure as a clarifier for kind of like, what is this card really trying to tell me, as well as a wrap-up message. I did that a lot with this deck. Kind of just give me a keyword to take away from this experience, particularly when we were looking at those really like deep readings, those really personal kind of in the nitty-gritty of things. There was a lot, and so it was really nice to kind of use this as just like, here's the end of the reading, give me a keyword or a message to take away from this experience, and it worked really well for that. So those were the two decks that I used for just kind of general readings, as well as my Simple Sunday readings throughout the month. But then I also used, this was another Northwest Tarot Symposium find. I bought this from Jenna at Moonlit Fae. Love her bags. I bought a couple of them actually. And I ended up using my trimmed version. So I mean, you can really tell the difference when I put them side by side. I much prefer this cardstock. But I ended up using this one quite a bit for some deep intuitive work, where I was kind of looking at feelings, really, and in all honesty, like I'm feeling this way about something, and I would pull a couple of cards from this deck, and I would lay that out on the table and go like, okay, what does this make me feel? And like this deck works amazing for that. I really wouldn't have thought to use it as like a way to kind of dive deep into the emotional landscape. It just, I don't know why it didn't really have that feel for me when I first started working with it. And it's funny because it's just this one. This one feels totally different. But this really, you know, borderless, completely just down to the artwork type of imagery that I have here in my trimmed copy has a completely different feel. It reads completely differently. And it really does allow me to kind of just dive into how do I feel about a situation. So, you know, because we're just hanging out here. I know I've got a ton of decks and we're just doing all kinds of things, but I want to show you just kind of how I would do that. And I did end up using the Urban Crow some with this experience as well. So a lot of times I would pull, I would think about, you know, what it is that's going on, what I'm having feels about, right? And then I would pull a couple of cards and I would lay them on the table because I still don't know this deck very well. So I have no idea what these are, what their tarot associations are, which actually works really, really well for that. I don't know if that will change as I work more with this copy as well. But for right now, what I've been doing is laying these out and going, okay, what do these make me feel? What comes to mind when I look at these? And I look at these and I think there's some definite big movement happening, a lot of fire energy, a lot of, I'm sure that's the Eight of Wands, right? I could probably hazard a guess at that, but there's a lot of passionate, crazy energy going on right now. And the Scissors is kind of telling me like, you kind of need to cut back on that. And then I've got this 2 over here with these 2 roses, which makes me feel like you need to bring some balance to this, right? And it's like, what does that make me feel? And it's just so funny because I've been talking to some friends about this too. Like my creative efforts have been a little chaotic lately and it's been like all in or nothing. And I need to cut it out and I need to find some balance, right? So I would think about, you know, how does that make me feel? And I would do some journaling on it as well. And then sometimes I would pull an Urban Crow card for a takeaway of fear. Like, seriously? My cards are never nice on camera, right? They're rarely nice in person either. Like, they tend to call me out. But fear, yeah. So what am I afraid of? Why am I in this chaotic sort of all or nothing creative energy? And what am I afraid of? Where does that fear come from? And I feel like that fear comes from, because we're here, let's just go ahead and do a reading. I feel like that fear comes from, I'm afraid that that creative push, that creative energy is going to leave and that I'm not going to be able to finish, or that it's just going to somehow evaporate or disappear, right? So I feel like I need to push through really, really quickly in order to get it all done. Let's pull, because now I'm just playing, even though I have like a ton more decks to show you. Now I'm just playing. Let's pull one of these ones just to see what tarot association we can pull in. The Three of Wands. Ooh, how cool is that? So for me, the Three of Wands, I don't know what it is particularly in this deck, but for me, that's about creativity. So it really, to me, reinforces the idea that this is about my creative process. And it's been a little bit chaotic. It's a little bit like just, oh my goodness, out of control. And I need to bring some balance into that so that I can create from a place of, not of fear, but of wholeness and understanding. I love the 2 crosses here because we do get that same kind of mirrored image balance. But can you see how it's like a little bit different? It feels different. Maybe it's just me. These feel more open. They feel very deep. They feel very emotional. And whereas the Raven's Prophecy with the borders feels more neutral. It doesn't push my emotional buttons as much. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that it feels more detached and it feels like it offers more perspective. But when I take that border away, now I feel like, oh man, I am just like all in that, right? Just all in it. Just all into the emotional energy of it. So those were the 3 decks that I used for a lot of my just kind of primary readings throughout the month, as well as, you know, doing my simple Sunday readings, a lot of kind of what's going on with me type of readings. Again, I used the Urban Crow a lot and I paired it with a lot of different things because for one, I was kind of just playing with it to see how it reads and what do I have that it'll work with. And also I just really, I really enjoyed it. It worked really well for me. So that is, I don't know why I keep putting these back in the bags, but clearly that's what we're doing in this in this video. I'm gonna put them all back. So that was the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, original, kind of untrimmed version, the trimmed version, and the Urban Crow Oracle. Real quick, let's just talk about a couple more decks, and then we're gonna move on to some books like super quick because this video has been really long already. This is the Trick or Treat Tarot, which I made a bag for and I edged, and it was so much fun. Check this bag out. Is that not cute? Okay. And I edged mine in green. I ended up going with the green because it's like the smallest accent color, and so I wanted to amplify it, and I think it's just cool. And plus I missed a whole side right there. I can see it. I'll have to get that marker back out. I don't have many decks edged in like a real bright vivid green, so it was fun to do this one. This has been my good mood deck for the month, which has been so much fun. There's actually quite a bit of depth to this deck though too. Like, I don't want to just say it's just a good mood deck and it's just for fun readings, right? Like it reads some serious stuff too as well. But this deck I pulled out pretty much anytime I was like, yeah, I just want to play. I just want to have some fun with my cards. This was the deck that I went to. I feel like, and I think I mentioned it in the walkthrough, that this is going to be like for real a good mood deck for me during the darker months of the year, where I can just like pull this deck out and have a play with these cards, get a nice little message, and yeah, it's so much fun. It makes me smile every time I look at it. It makes me giggle every time I look at it, and I really appreciate that about a deck, particularly like when we're in a time where like throughout October we were doing shadow work, right, in the monthly medicine. So like that was a lot of deep, heavy stuff, and it was so nice to have this as like a counterbalance to that, to kind of just like, oh my gosh, let's just take it down a notch. Let's chill. Let's have some fun, because I like tarot doesn't always have to be serious for me. Sometimes I just like to chill and hang out and have some fun and play with my cards. So I won't go too much into that because I did do a full video on it. The other deck that I was playing with is this little Santa Marta Tarot. This is the mini. I mentioned this in my Dark Decks Revisited because like I had the full size, I rehomed it, and then I bought the mini. And this deck is just fun. Again, it's another kind of good mood deck for me. I think in the smaller version, it's a good mood deck. I can't remember if it really was in the larger version or not because it's been a while since I've had it. But I tend to use my little pocket decks in the evening when I'm just kind of like pulling cards at night, or when I'm like in my living room or in my bedroom. Like when I'm outside of my normal tarot space here, I tend to use my mini decks. And so throughout October, I was using this one, which was just super fun. I mean, I had such a good time playing with this one. It's a great little deck. I still am on the fence of whether I'm going to get the big version again. But I kind of feel like now in this little version, like it kind of has its a little place as my kind of only spooky season mini deck for like hanging around the house and taking around places with me. I don't think I have another one, so I'm probably just going to keep it in the mini just so that I have that, because again, I tend to use the mini decks for that kind of thing. So anyway, those were two decks that I just really enjoyed working with here and there, particularly when I wanted to lighten things up. That was the Trick or Treat Tarot and the Santa Marta Tarot. So let's talk real quick about the decks that I used in my personal spiritual work. So outside of my tarot practice, but like linked to it. I mentioned both of these decks in my Dark Mother video because that is really how I work with these. This is of course the Mysteries of the Black Madonna. I really love this deck. The guidebook, I'm so happy to have it. Like I'm so thankful and grateful to the person who sent it to me, because like they just knew I needed it. It's been a huge part of my personal practice lately. In the last few months, it's been a huge part of my spiritual practice, and the work that I do with sort of that divine mother energy. Divine goddess, dark mother, as I mentioned in that video related to that, like they're all the same to me. They're just different faces of it. So I've been using this as primarily as like a altar card, and I've been pulling a card every couple days. Whenever I feel like it's time for a new message, I would pull a card, I put it on my altar, I read the guidebook. Occasionally, if I'm like a little unsure about what the message really is for me, then I'll grab a tarot deck or two to kind of flesh that out a little bit more. But I've been using it a lot as a way to connect with the Black Madonna energy, Dark Mother energy in general. So that's been a huge deck for me that I've used in my spiritual practice. The other deck that I've been playing with quite a bit recently, and I recently just made a bag. Check this bag out. It's like, it feels like snake skin, which is so cool for this deck because it's the Pythonic Tarot. As I mentioned in, I think, the Dark Mother video, this deck was very generously gifted to me, and like I really enjoy it. Here's the backs. I do believe it is available. Again, it's an indie deck. This one might be out of print, but I will check. I edged this one in black. I'm considering edging this one in gold, actually. Like, side note. Because, like, look at the backs, and then there's the gold border, and I'm just, I don't know, kind of feeling it, but I haven't yet, so we'll see. Anyway, I love this deck. This deck is fairly new to me, but I've been working with it a ton this month, and I've been trying to figure out, like, where it fits for me, right? What kind of an energy it has. It definitely is sitting in that Dark Mother work for me currently. I think it's a deck that I will probably find multiple uses for because there's just something about this artwork that really speaks to me. There's another spot I missed. You know, that just really drives me crazy. So, because my edging markers are sitting right here, or at least my black ones. The ones that I'm still planning on using to edge decks. I hate when I miss a spot. Anyway, what was I saying? Y'all, my videos are getting a little bit higgledy-piggledy these days. I think because, just total side tangent, I think because I have so many creative projects going on right now that, like, I'm making decks, I'm writing a book, like, I've got videos, I've got membership stuff, I've got monthly medicine. There's just so much going on right now that, like, I feel like my energy is a little bit scattered, and I feel like that's probably coming through my videos, but so I apologize if that's a little bit weird. Like, it just is what it is. This is my practice. This is how things are right now for me. I freaking love this deck. Oh my goodness. I love that card. Yeah. And it's, I think I might have mentioned it. The figures are all really quite young in this deck, but in a way they feel timeless, like ageless. And I think that's because I very much associate this deck with kind of that Dark Mother energy. It's got a very sort of crone, Hecate feel. That's kind of where it's leaning for me. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure out exactly where a deck is going to sit in my practice and exactly what type of work that I want to use it for. And so I'll try it out in a lot of different ways and see where it kind of fits. But like, it just, I don't know, it reads really beautifully, and it's got a really cool energy, and the artwork is just phenomenal. It just really is. Look at that moon card. This is one of those decks that I could just sit and look through check out that 10 of Wands. Sorry, distracted. Again, my energy's a bit all over the place. So my apologies. Trying to get things done by the end of the year, right? So I made that bag, and I do have the Oracle as well, which I also mentioned in the Dark Mother video. I haven't been, since I've made that video, I haven't been using it as much. And in fact, I think it's probably still in the same order that I showed it there. It has a lot of really cool things about it, and I was kind of playing with it with some as sort of ritual cards, pulling out specific cards for intention. And I did that for a while, and I did really enjoy it, but then I kind of found that I just wasn't reaching for it quite as much, and I was really just kind of digging into working with the tarot deck. And I don't think that's any reflection on this deck. Here's the backs. If I've been showing the backs, I forget sometimes. I edged it in black. So I'm kind of like still figuring out where that one sits in my collection, but I wanted to play with the Pythonic so bad that like that just ended up taking kind of precedence over the Oracle, although I did occasionally use them together. So those were the decks that I used primarily for my personal spiritual practice, so to speak, I guess. So that's the Black Madonna, Mysteries of the Black Madonna Tarot, I think is the full name, and the Pythonic Tarot and the Black Mirror Oracle. Okay, one last thing. I want to do just a couple books. And some of these are just guidebooks because I have been, what have I been reading? I'm reading the Broken Earth series, and that's taken up the majority of my reading time. But I was also reading, and I already put it on the ground, but the Phantasmagoria book, the Ian Daniels one. Sorry, I should have put that up here. I did end up getting with the 2 decks. I got the guidebooks for the Pythonic tarot. This is full of really fantastic information, but I'll be honest, like the text is really, really small and it's very hard for my older eyes to read. So I haven't been getting into it as much, but there's some really, really cool stuff in here. Same with the Black Mirror. I feel like this one's even smaller. So like it could be, I'm old. I don't know what to tell y'all. It's got a lot of really great information. So I kind of like have to focus and like have my glasses on and stuff, but I really have enjoyed kind of dipping in and out of these when working with those decks. I did read the Raven's Prophecy guidebook as well. Well, I read the introductory. Like, right, I didn't read every single card description. But I did, when I pull cards, oftentimes I'd pop into the guidebook just to see what Maggie Stiefvater had to say about the card itself. I love this. Like, I mean, I love the new, like all the, I don't know, all the color pictures and all that kind of stuff are fantastic. But the thing is if I want to write in a guidebook, which sometimes I do, like I kind of prefer just the black and white with the actual paper, because then I can take notes. And I used to do that a lot with my guidebooks, but it seems like lately a lot of the guidebooks aren't really papery. They're more in that almost like glossy magazine, and it's harder to write in. So I haven't been doing that as much, but I kind of like the old school. Just saying, I'm old. I like the old school thing. However, the Trick or Treat book is great. I mean, I love a Barbara Moore guidebook. Barbara Moore is one of my favorite deck creators. She is the most awesome person, and I really enjoy reading her interpretations. Like, she's one of those deck creators that I will actually read everything she writes about a card. I always read tarot based on my own understanding, right? But I love a lot of the time what Barbara Moore talks about in her guidebooks. And so I tend to incorporate that in as well. Her Wizard's Tarot guidebooks is like one of my favorites. It's fantastic. The Mysteries of the Black Madonna, I mentioned these 2 books in my Dark Mother video, so I'm not going to talk about them too much here, but I've been using this also not just as a guidebook for the deck itself, but like as a reference guide, because honestly, it's the best reference guide I've found for working with Black Madonna energy. If anybody has any suggestions for something, please let me know, because I've been struggling to find anything, and my struggle led me to this book, which I won't go into because I already did that in another video. I'll leave that linked in case you want to check it out. But this book was a total miss for me in the sense that it says the Black Madonna's gospel on it, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the Black Madonna. It's more about how we as human beings have moved so far away from the dark that like we can't even experience it anymore, and we've become so light polluted, like illuminated in both a literal and metaphorical sense, that like it's changed who we are as a species. I think, and I mentioned this in the other video, if I hadn't gone into this thinking that it was going to be about the Black Madonna, I would have been much more happy with it. It's a really interesting read, but if you pick it up, know that that's what you're reading about. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Black Madonna, and I feel like that needs to be removed from the cover, because it's completely misleading. There's only a few pages that even reference the Black Madonna and the author's experience with it. And I have this author's other books, The Way of the Rose, which I absolutely love. So like I really, really like his writing style, and I think he writes fantastic books, but I went into this thinking it was going to be one thing and it ended up being something totally different. So I was disappointed in that. However, it's an interesting book. It's just nothing to do with the Black Madonna. Like, this is about the Black Madonna. So like there's that, right? Okay, I'm not going to play the whole let's try to put all of my decks back on the table, because there's far too many this month. And I had a really fantastic time like playing with all of my, I say playing, but working with, and some playing, right? There's the occasional play, but working with all of my kind of dark and spooky decks for the season. I tend to do that in October. It's just a lot of fun to tie that energy into my practice. The one thing you might be thinking is, where's my tarot journal? I'm not going to show my tarot journal this month. I ended up doing digital tarot journaling because I was like traveling a lot. I had a lot of things going on, and it was easier to just do it digitally than it was to do the whole paper crafting thing in my regular journal. But honestly, because the most of the stuff that I did was monthly medicine and we were doing shadow work, like it got super personal. And I'm just not comfortable sharing it. So we're not. So we're not gonna look at it. It didn't end up being anything pretty anyway, so it's really nothing fancy to look at because I didn't do any sort of decorative stuff. I just dropped the picture of my cards into my digital journal and wrote about the prompts and the reflections and what I was learning through that experience. So there's really nothing to show anyway, but I would have to actually like block out every single page, like outside of the picture of the deck, so, or the spread or whatever it was I was doing. And that's just too much work and not worth it. But I'm probably going to be making some changes to the way I tarot journal anyway, moving forward. So there's that. Anyway, okay, so I think that's it for me. I know there's a couple of decks that I feel like I pulled in and out here and there that I didn't bring into this video, but because we've had plenty to look at anyway, and these were the majority of the decks that I worked with throughout the month, right? There's gonna be decks, like I'm always playing with my Llewellyn here and there. You know, I work with a lot of other decks that are very specific to things that I'm doing, but I don't necessarily always show them in my monthly wrap up because they don't necessarily relate to the direct work that I was doing that month. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box below. I also want to take a moment and thank all my channel members for their continued support of my work here. It means the world to me and helps me to be able to do this every single month. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you had a wonderful October and I wish you many blessings moving into November.